Hi everyone. Today is, well, Vlad tells me it's a momentous moment. He says that I am sitting down to listen to a highly anticipated Beatles number. That's all I know. He said, think in terms of the anticipation of yesterday, when you got to yesterday. Well, I don't know. Now I have yesterday running through my mind, but whatever this is, I suppose it will clear that from my ears pretty quickly, since it's the Beatles. All I know is that this is the second song that I'm listening to from Revolver. That doesn't even tell me if it's the second track, the second number on the album. I just have on my screen Revolver 2. That's it. And so, as we have decided to do for this album, that's all I'm going to know before I listen. And once I have listened, then I will read whatever important bits of information there are for me to learn about the song. And then we'll go back and tear it down. So let's dive in.
Ah, look at all the lonely people.
Well, so, first thing, the name of this song, I'm going to guess that it's Eleanor Rigby that you've all been talking about for so long. And, that's rather intense. Well, the strings, they remind me of the same kind of string sound that I heard on She's Leaving Home way back when. But this one is going to be a fun one to tear into. So let me just read what I have to read quickly, and then we'll go back and see how far our explorations take us.
Who's singing?
Oh, man. I was so taken in by the piece, I wasn't paying attention to whose voice it was. So that's a bit scary. Because now I have to think back to the sound that I recall.
Play it a bit.
Okay.
Ah, look at all the lonely
But of course,
people.
this is the chorus. This is scary. I'm going to guess that it's not John. I'm going to guess that it's Paul. Did I get it right? Woo! Okay.
Who wrote it?
Who wrote it? Oh, that's a tricky one too. It would be a bit easier for me to make an educated guess after I tear into the piece. But if I'm just going to throw a name out there, I'm going to say Paul, because it doesn't have some of those Lennon fingerprints that I've talked about, although occasionally he surprises me. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
All right. What do I have to read? Let's find out. So this is number 58 in this 150 series. And the genre is once again classed as Baroque pop. Okay, we'll talk about that. And rock. Okay, fair enough. Starts with a quote. I was sitting at the piano when I thought of it, Paul remembers, just like the comedian Jimmy Durant. The first few bars just came to me, and I got this name in my head, Daisy Hawkins. She picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. Those words just fell out like stream of consciousness stuff, but they started to set the tone of it all. Because you then have to ask yourself, what did I mean? It's a strange thing to do. Most people leave the rice there, unless she's a cleaner. So there's a possibility she's a cleaner in the church, or is it a little more poignant than that? She might be some lonely spinster of this parish who's not going to get a wedding, and that was what I chose. So this became a song about lonely people. And I have to say, he really caught this aura of loneliness in the sound of the music. In his 2021 book, The Lyrics, Paul elaborates, growing up, I knew a lot of old ladies, partly through what was called a Baba Job week, when Boy Scouts did chores for a shilling. you'd get a shilling for cleaning out a shed or mowing a lawn. I wanted to write a song that would sum them up. Eleanor Rigby is based on an old lady that I got on with very well. I don't even know how I first met Eleanor Rigby, but I would go around to her house, and not just once or twice. I found out that she lived on her own, so I would go around there and just chat, which is sort of crazy if you think about me being some young Liverpool guy. Later, I would offer to go and get her shopping. She'd give me a list and I'd bring the stuff back, and we'd sit in her kitchen. I still vividly remember the kitchen because she had a little crystal radio set. So I would visit, and just hearing her stories enriched my soul and influenced the songs I would later write. Isn't that lovely? I guess, in this whole Beatles journey, there hasn't been a lot of really personal information about the Beatles in what I've read, other than their loves and losses and frustrations and, humor. So I like this little bit of personal experience here, which seems to have come to life in this song, and it makes me think of Paul as a kind of a nice guy. I don't know really, because I haven't really explored their personalities outside of what I hear in their music, but at least when he was a kid, to go hang out with an lonely old lady, what a sweet thing to do, and what a natural thing, Oh, you're a little kid, well, you find an old lady that you can somehow relate to in some way or other, and you build a connection. In regards to the melody line chosen, Paul attempts to explain this as well. I can hear a whole song in one chord. In fact, I think you can hear a whole song in one note if you listen hard enough. I love that, if you listen hard enough. But nobody ever listens hard enough. Okay, so that's the Joan of Arc bit. I wrote it at the piano, just vamping on E major chord, letting that stay as a vamp and putting a melody over it, just danced over the top of it. It has almost Asian Indian rhythms. I couldn't think of much more, so I put it away for a day. As for the last name, Paul explains, I saw Rigby on a shop in Bristol when I was walking around the city one evening. I remember quite distinctively having the name Eleanor, looking around for a believable surname, and then wandering around the Docklands in Bristol and seeing the shop there. I was in Bristol on a visit to see Jane Asher at the Old Vic, January 66. And just walking around the dock area, I saw an old shop called Rigby, actually Rigby and Evans Limited, Wine and Spirits Shippers, just across the street from the Theatre Royal where Jane was starring in the play The Happiest Days of Your Life. And I thought, oh, it's a very ordinary name, and yet it's a special name. It was exactly what I wanted. So, Eleanor Rigby. I felt great. I got it. I pieced all the ideas together, got the melody and the chords. After hearing Paul play this beautiful song on acoustic guitar, Emmerich states in his book Here, There, and Everywhere that George Martin felt that the only accompaniment that was necessary was that of a double string quartet. 4 violins, 2 violas, and 2 cellos. Paul wasn't immediately enamored of the concept. He was afraid of it sounding too cloying, too Mancini, but George eventually talked him into it, assuring him he would write a string arrangement that would be suitable. Okay, but I want the strings to sound really biting, Paul warned as he signed off on the idea. So this is one of those where George Martin really stepped in and has a documented significant influence, the whole string arrangement. He did make it sound biting, didn't he? The violin backing was Paul's idea, John insists. Jane Asher had turned him on to Vivaldi. Vivaldi, of all things. And it was very good. The violins were straight out of Vivaldi. Maybe, in a way. I can't take any credit for that at all. As acknowledged in the book accompanying the 2022 deluxe editions of Revolver, the rhythmic drive of Eleanor Rigby is reminiscent of Winter, Allegro non molto from Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Paul humbly states, I thought of the backing, but it was George Martin who finished it off. I just go bash bash on the piano. He knows what I mean. Oh, isn't that great? So, now that I'm thinking about this Vivaldi Winter connection, I guess I could kind of see where it comes from. At the same time, to my ears, I would still, if I were placing this in a quartet timeline, strings, classical music timeline, somehow I'd find myself tending towards kind of a Schubert style. It's late classical, early romantic. Maybe it has to do with the styling to my ears that doesn't strike me as Vivaldi, but now listening to their concept and how they came about, I can see how it could be inspired by Vivaldi, certainly. Yeah. Well, let's go back and listen in every little detail, and I'll share my thoughts along the way.
Look at all the lonely people.
Doesn't it start right in with, it's kind of like, well, and if I had sat down to think about who wrote this song in more detail, maybe I would have gotten it wrong, because now, thinking about this opening, it launches straight in without any instrumental introduction. The voices are serving as the primary introductory element here. In that way, it's a bit reminiscent of Help, and I did another one recently which also took off that way.
Give me some truth.
Give Me Some Truth. Yeah, and I guess those were both Lennon's songs. So if I were really trying to look at every detail, this might have actually confused me. Good example of sometimes you just need to go with your gut, right? So, but this starts right in, and immediately I hear that it's different. It's really different than what we've been doing, what we've been hearing. I really have to place it with She's Leaving Home. Even this aura of loneliness, they both carry a bit of that, don't they? Where is She's Leaving Home? Is it on the same album? Is it on a later album? Okay. Anyway, I guess this is the first time we hear this sound then on this album, even before She's Leaving Home.
Look at all the lonely people.
And what an intense introduction that is. I like this description of the strings being biting. They are. They're edgy. They're a bit brash and should I say sawtoothed. They're really sawing. In fact, if we talk about string technique, they're sawing. They're down at the frog of what we call the frog, the base of the bow, and that gives that really intense, just this saw, 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 saw. I'm hearing a lot of that here, which is very different from something lighter or using more up bows, higher on the bow, middle of the bow. I'm not a string player. I know plenty of string players, and it's a whole different world than how my fingers touch the strings. But at the same time, the concept is the same. How you do it, where you do it, the weight, the position, the placement, all of that has so much to do with the sound that comes out. And so also here, they really got this chee, 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 chee sound going on. Even the cello, when it comes in, sounds, well, it's rather abrupt at the beginning.
Look at all.
Ba-ba-bum. Just the voices first, and then the cello comes in. Maybe there's a violin in there too.
Look at all the lonely.
See, the score, yes, the score shows a violin at the beginning, but you don't hear that. You hear the look at all the lonely people. It's there's something immediately distressing about it. And even the way it goes from this C major. Look at all the lonely people. and we end on an E minor. There's not a lot of, should I say, functional harmonic progressions in here, meaning we don't have the classic 1 moving to 5 or moving to 4, the progressions, the relationship between 2 and all. We don't feel that. In fact, well, I'll have to look through here, but I didn't really hear much of a 1-5 progression or even a 1-4 progression. We start with a C. We go to an E minor. It's not really clear even. And this isn't anything new with the Beatles, actually. I've talked about this quite a while ago now. But a lot of their introductions aren't really tonally specific. You don't really know where you're going to end up landing. And same here. Okay. Are we in C? Are we in E minor? Are we doing something else? Where is this going to go? But doesn't it give us this feeling of kind of an exclamation of, a distressed exclamation, kind of disbelief and despair, and maybe it pulls a bit of pity out of us. Because it's not us that are lonely. We're looking at the lonely people. And then when these violin notes come in, sounds really pretty on the harp, doesn't it? It doesn't give the same distressing sound that you hear in the strings. Ching, 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 ching. But it feels busy, like you're, I don't know, standing in a street corner and looking at everybody coming and going, and you're kind of considering this fact that everybody passing through here, nearly everybody, is lonely. They're nearly all lonely. They're coming, they're going about their lives, but somehow we are hit by the realization that all of this merely disguises the loneliness in the world around us. And that's one thing that I was struck by as I was listening to this song for the first time. There is such a feeling of activity in the accompaniment. Busyness, crossing, motion, activity. But it's not really going anywhere. Coming back to this idea of, well, I'll just break the news to you. It looks like we're settling into a sort of E minor. Well, even he said in the introduction, right? He was vamping on E minor. And so there's a lot of E minor, a lot of E minor. That's where we settle. But we're just kind of doing stuff with E minor. We're not really going to say, we're not going to the 5 to give a, we don't hear this feeling of direction. We don't feel this sense of, we could even give a 5-7 if we wanted. That feels much more directed. We don't hear that at all. That sounds so foreign to this kind of this general quality throughout the piece. And it immediately hits us right from the beginning here with this, look at all the lonely people. Another thing I can't help but comment on, just noticing techniques. These are thirds here. Look at all the lonely people. And remember, even from early in this series, I was commenting on how many times I hear fourths and fifths in the vocal harmonies. Here we don't hear that so much. It's more parallel thirds riding up and down the line when there's harmonization. And then this violin bit here. Let's hear that.
All the lonely people.
I love the way this cello just jumps down, da-da-dum, and sits on that low note. It's kind of jaggedly presented, isn't it? Where we have people ending here, but we don't really land until here on the bass note. And it's even after that that the strings start carrying on their conversation or it's not so much a conversation. If I go with this image of I'm sitting at a street corner or somewhere, people watching, then these strings can kind of be the people crossing paths back and forth, I see them going here, going there, and the strings are kind of dee 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 dee. It's two different directions or two different directions of traffic. Also, I wouldn't call it automobile traffic because it has this kind of walking quality. There's this sort of jagged dee 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 dee. So we feel like, at least I feel like, this is a really vivid, colorful portrayal of any ordinary street corner in any ordinary town, coming and going. And it's interesting to me because later I felt a different location, of course, with the lyrics and the church and everything. But this is to me out in a public space.
It's not a driving song.
Oh no. But this is viewing a public space and the public activities going on there. To me, that's how it sounds.
Lonely people.
And these cello notes that are just digging in. It's like well, in some pieces of music we don't notice the bass so much. It's just present there. In an arrangement like this, one of the things that we notice is how spaced out the parts are. We have the voices up here. Look at all the lonely. And then we have the strings up here. They even sound like they're not really, but the tone quality, the timbre makes them feel more up here, although you can hear that it's really supposed to be here, but it's more than just pitch. It's timbre. It's the tone quality of the instrument itself, and it's the sort of staccato playing technique, which also spaces things apart. And so then when we hear the bass down here on this note, actually, let's make sure that this is the note we've got.
Eleanor Rigby picks up the...
So it's not just a note here. We're way down here. Way down at the bottom of the cello range. I mean, this is the lowest note of your cello right there. So think of the range that's happening here vertically. And the space and separation between the instruments themselves, pitch-wise, and in their way of articulating each note. Doesn't that also kind of embody the separation, the individual placement of the people, even as they're crossing and in this public space moving about? It's as if there is no human connection one to another. They're separate, they're isolated, they're lonely. And I always love noticing these little details because I'm absolutely positive that the Beatles nor George Martin didn't sit down and think, all right, I need to have this image in my mind and I need to create a piece of music that conveys this. But still, somehow, when a composer, a performing group, catches the essence of a mood, then we start unraveling it and we realize somehow in their catching that mood quality and portraying it, so much comes out in all the little details that we could place and link to context, circumstances, individuals, activities, just because of the nature of it. And when you find something like that, you know that you've really got whoever wrote it, whoever performed it, really got it. It's not a sort of artificial, going to make something up that kind of gives us this feeling. Because they caught the feeling so well, everything about how they caught it can fit that the context in which we find that feeling, the scenarios, the experiences, this idea of separation, distance, lack of connection, is what I find right here immediately in the introduction, and also harmonically, lack of direction, lack of drive. There's just this loneliness all about.
Eleanor Rigby
then
picks
we
up
launch
the
into
rice
this.
in the church where a wedding has been.
Chink, 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 chink. Now it's just serving as a background, but still it's the same quality of kind of time is marching on. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing is really happening. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm thinking about what I read. How this line came out. Picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been, and how he decided what kind of personality, what kind of person and character he's going to portray. Is it a cleaner? Perhaps, but we end up hearing something a bit different. She's a spinster, probably never going to get married herself. At least she feels like that. And I don't picture her as being, well, you don't normally picture spinsters as being young, right? But a little bit older, middle-aged, the time of most common marrying age is past. And so you're there for a wedding. And this makes me question, why was she there for this wedding? Because later on we find out she died and nobody came to her funeral. What sort of connection did she have to these people? Were they maybe someone she worked for, maybe some distant acquaintance, but clearly not a friend? And this image of her just standing, picking up the rice, bending over, picking up the rice. A wedding that's not hers. I mean, it's so vivid, just these few little bits of information. And that's a great bit of text writing when you can build a picture out of just a handful of words in the story.
Lives in a dream, waits at the window.
Right, okay, before I get into talking about the music here, I have to go ahead and comment on this line. Lives in a dream, waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. What an image. Well, now that I'm actually thinking about it, maybe it's different than what it struck me at first. I had this idea of, this lonely person, and whenever they go outside, they put on a different expression. They disguise the loneliness. Well, and this idea of reaching into a jar to put on this face was really vivid in my mind. Now I'm thinking, well, it could be makeup, it could be dressing yourself up. It's kind of the same idea, but somehow I like this idea of just reaching in, putting on this face as you step out the door. Disguise yourself. Disguise your loneliness. Look like everybody else out in the public street. Okay, let's get to the music here. I said I would look and see, keep my eyes open for harmonic direction in this piece, and there isn't much. So far, we've only seen E minor for a long while, another bit of C back to E minor, a little bit of E minor back to C, C, E minor with a 7, but still basically E minor, C, E minor. Look at this, all of this E minor. Imagine a piece with this much emotional impact being mostly just this. And then what comes out of it is well, you find little strands, little lines. And I love what he said about if you listen hard enough, you can hear a whole song in a chord. If you listen hard enough, you can even hear a whole song in a single note. But let's see what sort of stuff comes out of this one chord here, because it's really great. I'm thinking how to do this. How about we start with the string parts? Most of what is not this is taking one of these notes, and I'll name them. I have E, I have G, I have B. And whenever I'm not playing one of these notes, I'm walking away from or walking to one of them. If I look at this bit here, has a bit of movement in it that is not one of those notes. I'm starting at a B. Then I walk down, back to the E. I walk down, back to the E. And I walk up. Of those notes, the only two non-chord notes were these. And each time that I walked through one or past one, I went back to one of the chord notes. I'm just passing down into, and I'll keep that falling line a little bit longer before I return to the root of the chord. Now, as we think about this, how does this illustrate how does this add to the atmosphere of the music? Other than this, well, even with this, imagine. It's kind of a sigh. You take in a sharp breath, a little bit distressed or disturbed, and then you just let it go. Because what else to do? And this whole piece has kind of a feeling of an unsettled sigh. Waits at the window. You can hear Eleanor Rigby standing at the window, looking out, waiting, and hear this in her demeanor. And one of the few bits that is not just this chord, well, it's still this chord. It's built out of, it's found through this chord, but it is that sigh. Well, let's see what else we can find here. This is a lot of fun. We've got some cello business. I'll come to that later because that comes in a later verse. So we went all the way to here. Oh, this. Okay, we're getting to the refrain now, the chorus. All the lonely people. Since we're staying with the strings, let's go ahead and hear this too. I'll draw it, what I see on the paper here, and then we'll listen to it. So you see how suddenly everything thins out here. There's not much, but one lonely, long note. Now looking ahead, we have to jump here with our eyes, okay? So it's a bit of a leap. We've got to go here. It's just the way the score works. But this was a D at the top. And now we end up with a D flat, or we could call it a C sharp. It's where we're traveling next. And then a C natural. And then a B. Now let's see, it looks like that's happening again. Yes, same thing happens again. Listen to this line. Oopsie, start on a D here. Let's explore that for a minute. I could even put it down here. Kind of a feeling of descent, mournfulness, deflation, all the dreams and ambitions just kind of fizzling away in this loneliness, in this inability to move forward into anything that would change the state. So we have this establishment on E minor. And if we look at the cello, we've got this low E down here. We're sitting on this E. We might parse these chords a bit more completely if we wanted to, but we're just going to stick with this. So this is happening down here. This is our E. This is finding the music within the chord, within the note. Now listen. Ooh, that's a bit dissonant. Okay, we're moving. Okay, we're moving a little further. And I'm playing this note repeatedly down here so we can constantly hear it against what's this 4-note chromatic descent. A simple little line. I'm digging into these little details because there's not a lot else in the music other than these 2 chords. And we'll find a few more along the way perhaps, but this is the bulk of the music. 2 chords. The song is primarily built around 1 chord. And all of these parts are just being extrapolated from this tonality. It's kind of modal in that way, isn't it? Well, let me think about these modes as we go on. I might have some more to say now that I think of that. Okay. That is the string part. Sighing, or else just static, separate. Let's listen. Let's back up and listen to that chorus there.
Waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door.
And there's this sort of exclamation in the violin right here. No, it's not there. That's the vocal line. I guess it doesn't really. Do they? Here. I'm in the wrong line. There. Ba-ba-da-da-bom-bom. A little bit of an exclamation, venting of feelings, but it immediately falls back down. Da-ba-da-da-da-dum. Deet, back into the same life. Okay, the voices. Haven't talked about the melody much yet. Well, we've got another verse coming up, so let's just continue through the next verse, and we'll make this a melody-focused verse.
Father Mackenzie, writing the words of a sermon that no one will hear.
So, back to the poetic technique here. I like how it goes a little impulse, and then a long line, and then there's this kind of the summary or observation. We hear Father Mackenzie writing the words of a sermon that no one will hear. That's kind of a long thought. Father Mackenzie writing the words of a sermon that no one will hear. How does this Father Mackenzie come into it? We were just talking about Eleanor Rigby. Now it's Father Mackenzie. We introduce the character, then we hear a line of what their activity is. There's sort of a commentary on it. No one will hear. No one will hear. Putting all this effort into writing a sermon, no one is going to hear it. I mean, now I'm getting the image of a church that is used to be full, but now nobody comes, nobody cares, nobody's interested, nobody is connected to their community, to their home life in such a way as to show up at church. Well, I suppose you could say this is a commentary on religious sentiments and developments in society as well, but I feel like it's mostly about this lack of connection. You're disconnected from your community, from the things that used to hold the fabric together. Church was one of them. Nobody comes now. And isn't it interesting that, well, I don't know, did it say? But somehow I think of Eleanor Rigby picking up rice in a church, because that's usually where weddings are held. Well, today there's a lot of outdoor stuff, but let me just check the lyrics here. Oh yes, picks up the rice in a church. Okay. I gotta remember all these things. So I get the feeling that Father Mackenzie perhaps was the one who officiated at the wedding. But now that couple's gone. The church is empty again. He's busy writing his next sermon. Of course nobody's going to hear it, because nobody bothers to come, except for a wedding or a funeral, it seems. We'll see about that. Now, musically, what's going on here? I love the way this feels so conversational. Father Mackenzie. Da 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 da. Nice sequencing of the rise and fall, but it's mostly a statement, and then just like that, perhaps that string bit that I pointed out that was it's kind of modeled after this. Ya da 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 da. No one will hear. It's the same overall shape, and the fact that there are no melismas, it keeps it kind of moving along in this disconnected manner. We don't hear connecting ya da 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 da. You could hear one syllable there linked, but no, each syllable is separate for a reason. Musically, it's important. Well, we could get bogged down in all these details, but let's keep moving, because there are a few other things I want to touch on that I noticed in my first listen.
Writing the words of a sermon that no one will hear.
Here's that cello line. Yeah, da 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 da. Finally, some bit of rising activity, motion going forwards, a scale that feels like it has a sense of direction, an arrival point. But just as quickly as it comes, it fades away. It's as if maybe there was a spark of hope. No. Life goes on.
Writing the words of a sermon that no one will hear.
Violin. Da 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 dum bum 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 bum. Let's find where this is in the score. Yes. Oh, I guess I already commented on this. It's coming back again. Da 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 dum bum. That is that sigh motif, isn't it? Kind of separated. Da 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 dum bum 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 bum. Same thing.
Look at him working, darning his socks in the night when there's nobody there.
This all the lonely people. It's sung in such a way that you almost could feel like it's not being sung. All the lonely people. Where do they all come from?
People, where do they all come from?
Where do they all come from? All the lonely people. Where do they all belong? The exclamation of it. Where do they all belong? Like, I'm sitting here watching this all happen, and I can hardly believe that the world is like this. Where do they all belong? Where do they come from? Where do they belong? This is so not right.
Do they all belong?
Oh, also, may as well point it out here, although your ears might be sharpened for it by now. It's this sharp intake and then a long sigh. Where do they all belong? Which I'm seeing is quite a feature of this piece.
Do they all belong?
And the way the violin echoes it.
Look at all the lonely people.
This, look at all the lonely people. Well, my lyrics say, as if it's an exclamation. Look at all the lonely people. But as I'm listening to how they sing it, it could be an open eye. Like, I look at all the lonely people. I am looking at all the lonely people. I look at all the lonely people. And this is what I see. And so it could be this kind of double. You could take it as or I, or even you could stack both of them together. So it's I look at all the lonely people. And as I look at all the lonely people, this exclamation of, it hurts to see it.
Look at all the lonely.
Even the way they sing, it's almost like you're saying, ha, which sometimes you hear British, Australians, others throw an H in there where they don't mean to. And so that makes me think more of I. Hi, look at all the lonely. But as I'm thinking about it, it's I look at all the lonely people, and it's an invitation. It's me exclaiming, it hurts to look at all the lonely people, and it's me inviting you to also look at all the lonely people. It's kind of a call to look around us and see the disconnect and the loneliness and the state of society that exists kind of in the same way that Simon and Garfunkel's Sound of Silence called us to look at what's happening. Only this feels different, of course. Both of them have a beautiful sound, a beautiful presentation. This one feels a little more uncomfortable, musically speaking. In that sense, I would say that the Beatles have done far more to embody this state of loneliness in the music, to capture the essence of it. And it's just so, well, I'm going to use the word eloquent.
Look at all the lonely people.
Listen to what's happening in the violins there. They're adding a bit more to what's going on. Bum, 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 bum. Notice though, it's still this descent in shape. And well, let's listen to this again.
Lonely people.
It's such a beautiful thing, the way those violins come cascading in, and in a different context, perhaps I could take it as expressing something else. But in this context, with all that's been going on musically, with those jagged punctuations of the other strings, and the story that is developing here, somehow I feel like it's the end of all the dreams and hopes and possibilities that existed throughout life, and it just came and ended at the bottom of the grave. It doesn't have to be that, but these strings are just adding another layer of sonic complexity to the music around this story, and they're doing so in a way that is consistent with the shape of the music so far. This sharp intake, long sigh, quick rising of hopes, and then constant descent, deflation, depression, loneliness.
Eleanor Rigby died in the church and was buried along with her name.
So, paying attention to what's happening lyrically, because one has to in this song. You can't help but pay attention. It wouldn't exist without these lyrics. Eleanor Rigby died in the church and was buried along with her name. I'll tell you what I love about these lyrics. I love how there are such specific, colorful details about the individuals discovered, written in just a single line. And it's done so in such a way that you understand far more than was even written. Died in the church. Same church where she was picking up rice after some wedding. The same church where Father Mackenzie preaches a sermon that nobody will hear. I get the feeling that Eleanor Rigby kind of lived in the church. There's a sort of, it was maybe the only place that she could feel like she could find some comfort or, pour out her inner self. She's the lone parishioner. And then going back to no one will hear Father Mackenzie's sermon. Well, she's sitting there probably, but she's not really hearing it because she's in her own world of loneliness, in her own world of wherever her mind is. She sits there because there's no other place for her to sit. So I build this image of two lonely people in the same place, in the same building. They both spend a lot of time there. And even so, there is no connection that has developed between them. It's a continuation of this lack of connection and therefore this perpetuation of loneliness, which we find on the street corner when we sit and watch people coming and going. We find it in every corner of society. We find it in the very places which should be offering comfort and solace and meaning and direction and connection in the church. It doesn't matter what religion you are. It wouldn't even have to be a church, but any religious building could serve as the same. But this is, of course, is set in England, so it's got to be a church. And so there she died. And that was that. And she was buried along with her name. Meaning, well, you could take it as saying she never got married. She never changed her name. She never took somebody else's name. But again, I feel like it's more. It's more than that. It's nobody remembered her. When she was buried, her name was buried. Nobody recalled her name. Nobody came. Well, of course, Father Mackenzie was there. He didn't come to the funeral. He was there doing the rites because that's his duty. He's going through the motions of his daily duties in the church, and that's what he does with his life. Wiping the dirt from his hands as he walks from the grave. Like, well, sad, huh? That was my last parishioner. Fulfilling his duties, no one was saved. He also is an image of loneliness and isolation, isn't he? And even as he is performing the last rites for Eleanor Rigby, we hear and we feel that the dissatisfaction that he feels in himself. No one was saved. There was nothing achieved in this. And then we launch into all the lonely people, which tells us that this is not just a story about two lonely people in a little church somewhere. This is the story of so many people. You step out your door, and who do you see? Well, maybe I should say, what do you see? Because until you build a connection, there is no who, it's only what. What you see is lonely people.
Nobody came, Father Mackenzie.
And then we just march down to the end, kind of like we're marching to our graves. That's the way the story ends. Everybody's still lonely. I feel like saying, isn't it a pity that Eleanor Rigby didn't somehow have a young Paul McCartney showing up at her doorstep, stopping by to chat once or twice a week? As he grows up, he goes out to bring her groceries. Somehow, I feel like it would have changed the story so much. Her life would have, even if she never got married, there would have been someone in her life, a little bright spot of sunshine. And, well, all right. Wrapping it all up. I have a hard time calling this piece rock music. To me, it is a classical style piece of music. It fits very comfortably in the classical under the classical umbrella. As I said, I go towards Schubert era, partly because of the chord progression, harmonic design. Yes, I can understand how they might have been inspired by Vivaldi, but this is clearly not Vivaldi at all, not to my ears. But it certainly isn't what I would describe as rock either. And I also can understand how so many of you love this and are so attached to this piece of music, because it is so incredibly expressive. It captures an emotion. It captures a state, and it does it so perfectly. You know, as much as I like this piece of music, and I hope that you've seen as I kind of pull out technical elements and point out what I noticed technically that I think helps make it be what it is, I don't know if I will listen to this for pleasure very often, because somehow I feel sad. It's a painful piece to listen to. It kind of, well, as I said, it starts us off feeling unsettled, uncomfortable, and it leaves us with that feeling of what a sad state the world is in. But at the same time, it's a call for us to open our eyes and look and see more than what is out there, but to start to see who is out there. Maybe just across the street there's an Eleanor Rigby. Maybe if some of us young people can go drop by, chat her up a bit, just say, hey, how are you doing today? Start building these connections. And remember, it's kind of a common thing, at least I see it a lot on social media, the idea of never forget that the people you see around you have their own struggles. I guess I would change that a bit. It's not about just remembering that and having sympathy that, okay, they have their struggles too. It's more than that. Instead of just remembering they have their struggles, how about we start building connections? How about we seek out the Eleanor Rigbys? How about if we are an Eleanor Rigby, maybe seek out a young Paul McCartney if we can? Oh, wouldn't that be something? But find a way to open the door, open the window, reach out a hand. It doesn't matter whether anybody is saved or not. Just connect and see where it takes you. And I'll try to do the same. I'll see you all soon.